Okay, good morning, y'all. This is Ron. It's Saturday morning, so we will get started. Uh, just briefly what we talked about on last week. We started off looking at a couple of things. We're talking about questions from over the weekend. And of course, we continue to talk. Everything we talk about involves spirituality. So that was something that we discussed, and we started off talking, fielding questions. And one of the questions that started us off was looking at the attractiveness that young Black people, the youth 18 to 23, are taking to Donald Trump. And that kind of got us going, looking at that trying to see that from a spiritual perspective. Uh, and that led to some other things. And I think Evelyn was the one that asked the question about Matthew 9 and 35 through 38. The harvest is plentiful, and that led to a great discussion. Some insight was presented to us there from Audrey and Barb and Kathy, and so and then we got into that tied in beautifully, Joshua chapter 8, looking at the house of Bethel and Ai, and we tied that Genesis 12 when Abraham left and he first made that observation, and Joshua being your deliverance, and tied that into those verses. So any questions about that? I have a question that somebody texted me that I'll get to in a minute, but I want to see if there are any questions about what we discussed on Monday, because I thought there was a great discussion there and a lot of insight. So anybody have any questions or comments on any of that information?
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
I listened to what was said on Monday, and one of the first things that was said was in reference to young people supporting Trump. I ironic that I listened at this African pollster this morning, and the reason it shows that there is an increase in Black support for Trump or African support for Trump is based on a class I took years ago, How to Lie with Statistics. One of the ways to lie with statistics is to choose very carefully the zip code. In this particular case, they didn't do that. They had very, very small samples of African people with whom they talked. Their sample size was like 150 or less. And the normal or usual sample size is 700, 1,600 people or more. So what's being reflected in those numbers is more of sample size than it is a shift. Now, has there been a shift? Of course it has. Of course it has. And that shift is mostly among African women. And the shift among African women is different than the shift among African men. The shift among African women is because of the high prices at the grocery stores, of course, but also what's happening in Gaza. The shift among African men is primarily what was stated. Trump is not a politician. And I, like Audrey, don't understand that rationale. It makes absolutely no sense. But I rest my case on the reality of sample sizes being small. In addition to that, I do not believe that that Trump is going to be able to maintain sanity in order for him to stand for election. I do believe that his mind would be like that of Nebuchadnezzar in that he will lose it just before the election. And then you will have a choice between an old man who is the representation of racist liberalism versus an old man who is without his mental faculties and is representing the old enslavers idea of how to form a country. And so that and other things I saw. One of the things that was said when you mentioned Jesus and where we are with that now, I know that the last straw with us traversing the space that separated us from clear sight into spirituality was the embracing of Jesus. And since Jesus is no longer being embraced because we understand it never existed, that has allowed us to clear our vision, our spiritual vision, and to see this, and to occupy rather the space of spirituality. What I'm saying by that is this: the moment that we embraced the non-existence of Jesus is the moment that the ancestors allowed us to see more clearly the spiritual aspects of what reality really is. The idea of evangelism is a reflection of the thought patterns of Europeans, especially males. Primarily, the women are sent out to evangelize, the men are sent out to preach, whatever that means. And the goal is to angleize the thought patterns of everybody, have everyone thinking like a European. Even with the idea of knowing God equals wealth, all of that are principles of the European thoughts. And it's funny how there are people with us. When I say us, I'm talking about people who are privy to what we've been talking about, find it very difficult to walk away from religion. I want to share this deeply. Again, this is not to hurt anyone. It's simply a reality. You will not be able to occupy this space of elevated spirituality, meaning this space that transcends time and space, until there is a recognition and acceptance that a religion that was predicated on imperialism, invasion of the Greeks/Romans, a religion that is based upon the death of those who refused to accept that religion, a religion that took the sacred writings out of Kemet and for 1,000 years prepared what is now called the Bible. A religion that is 2,000 years old, um, with Judaism, of course, being 1,100 years instead of the 4,000 they lie about, and Islam being even younger than that. Those religions, very recent, and when you look at the space of time, 2,000 years, 1,100 years, that is a drop in the bucket. It baffles me how once we have been shown the spirituality of the spiritual nature of the African who has been an occupant of this earth for 40 years and has fostered the structure of kingdom beyond anyone's imagination, even to this day. And were able to accomplish feats that cannot be replicated today. It baffles me how we can hold on to something that cannot be proven and disregard something that can be proven. It baffles me. Now, what am I saying? I have been indoctrinated just like everyone else when it comes to Christianity, and I take full responsibility for having indoctrinated people with Christianity. And for that, I have repented. And yet when I was begun to see the essence of spirituality and the non-existence of Jesus' disciples or non-existence of the people in the Bible, not necessarily the servants of the word, but the people. When I saw that, I embraced it because once I embarked on this journey, my words were to, at that time I was calling it God. My words to the Creator was, wherever it takes me, whatever I have to give up, it doesn't matter. I want to know the truth. I want to know what it means to truly be spiritual. That desire has been answered. That desire has been fulfilled, I should say. And now the desire is to see with such a clarity until spirituality can be simplified so that everyone would be able to embrace it for the realness that it is. I'm going to stop with that. Those are the things, some of the things I gleaned from what we were talking about. But there's one other thing I want to talk about that I gleaned from that. However, I want to see at this point if there are questions in regards to that. Statements or comments. I listened at the latter part of the discussion. And in the latter part of the discussion about the harvest is plentiful, but the labors are few. I listened, excuse me, at that discussion, and I heard all the discussion about the internal search for self and how we must first be a laborer, not only sowing seeds, but also harvesting them. And the harvest is our understanding of spirituality and continued embracing of it. And that led me to a thought, that a question actually that I had a couple of weeks ago. And that question was, and see what was, how is it that the priests of Kemet were able to write, to leave the sacred writings for us to be guided by. How is that? How did they receive those sacred writings? If we can understand how they receive those sacred writings, we can understand what it looks like, hopefully, to be spiritual and to be internal and intentional, as Barb said earlier, on Monday rather, intentional. How is it that we can be spiritual and intentional at the same time? How is it that we can honestly, truthfully, without shadow of any doubt, place things in the macro for the benefit of humanity? Well, we would have to employ, I do believe, the same methods that Tibetan priests employed when they received the sacred writings. The way that I was shown that they received the sacred writings was because of the frequency of vibration with the universe. When your desire resonates with the frequency of the universe, then you are vibrating at that frequency. When we are vibrating in unison with the universe, we see spirituality far clearer than we do prior to that resonance. The reason we are able to respond to questions that we have not had a privilege to peruse is because of the resonance that we have with the universe. How does that happen? When we are in this space of us Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, we are feeding off of each other and we help each other resonate at the same frequency of the universe. And that gives us greater insight into who we are, but greater insight into understanding of the words that were removed from the sacred writings of Kemet and placed in this manipulated structure called the Bible. When we understand that the purpose of education was to teach the spiritual essence of who we are, and that the understanding of education had its genesis in Kemet, of course, and in teaching the spiritual essence of who we are, we were being taught to resonate, being taught to vibrate at the same frequency of the universe. One of the reasons I do my best to remain in the state of meditation is because I desire to be in resonance with the universe at all times. I desire to vibrate at that same frequency. My desire is to be in rhythm with the universe at all times, and being in that space grants me opportunity to be to mankind what is purpose for me to be, but not only to mankind globally, but also to those who are in my presence, to those who are in my orbit. That resonance grants me also the privilege to be able to understand questions and to see beyond the printed page and see the spiritual writings that's in the heart, as opposed to simply just writings on the page. That is one of the things that I stress is just because you can read what's on the page, it doesn't mean that you understand what's on the page. And that is evident when we look at so-called evangelism. when we look at the um, the Anglicizing of mindset and the diminishing of the African characteristics. The first thing that happens after the introduction to Jesus is that you can no longer be Obote. That's a pagan name. You can no longer be Kwame. That's a pagan name. You need to Anglicize your name. Your name needs to be John or Johnny or whatever. That is the first step towards separating you from your culture, separating you from everything that is important to you, separating you from everything that is real, and connecting you to a system of greed, murder, a system of barbarism, connecting to a system that will allow someone to say that they're more in tune with Trump than they are with anything else. And notice I did not compare him to Biden because the most dangerous people in America are white liberals, to people of color anyway. And we can talk about that later. But at this current time, I simply want us to see or to understand that the reason Black males in particular are going for Trump is because Black males have been indoctrinated with the European sense of masculinity and has abandoned masculinity from the perspective of the African. I'm done. And thank you for granting me permission to speak to those things that I gleaned from Monday night's lesson.
Perhaps I just have one quick thing to say, something I read this week, and it's very practical, but I think it ties in to what you were just saying. This writer was talking about vibration and being in rhythm with the universe. And one of the things he said was, of course, the focus of was talking about meditation, but he talked about our diets and what we eat. We are a society that likes meat. We are a society that is always in a hurry and like fast food, and just the things we eat kind of block those vibrations that we seek. It just made sense to me. He talked about eating more raw foods, fruits and vegetables, and even foods with high water content. And don't always look to be full when you eat, or just eat because it's necessary. Eat enough, or without just the pleasure of gluttony. So those aren't his words that way, but those are mine, what I got from it. So what do you think about that as far as what you've said so far? Just tying that in.
I I believe that is spot on. Because even though meat has proteins, the meat protein is different than the protein that is received from vegetables and fruits. The protein from vegetables and fruit are more attuned to what the body needs than the proteins from animals. Also, I believe it because of the amount of processed food that is readily available. And if we really think about it, there's no nutritional value in processed food. This is my theory. I believe the reason we see so much obesity is not because of the amount of food that people eat, but just because of the non-nutritional food that people eat, and their brains are being tricked into believing that that they are full, and that their body is being energized, not being kept alive by real food. And the obesity is not based on fat content or sugars. The obesity is based on starvation.
Mm.
Have you seen the body with starving people, how the abdomen?
Yes.
I believe that the body's been starved. Sugar cannot fulfill the needs that the body has to survive. Neither can salt. It takes a combination of vitamins that we find in foods, of protein and carbohydrates that we find in food. Those things, for the most part, are either absent or overshadowed by the chemicals, the preservatives that's in the foods that we eat, especially from fast food restaurants. I stopped eating at Chick-fil-A because I read where they had begun to put preservatives in their food. I no longer will eat at Panera because I read an article that said Panera is beginning to use foods with preservatives in them. So I readily embrace what you gleaned from the article you read or the video you watched, whichever is applicable.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions, anybody? Comments? I'm going to read a question that someone asked and also just open it up because of what pastors talked about was the video from last Monday. So if you guys have any other questions or comments or anything, I'm going to start it off with this question, okay? Someone sent a question in to me that said, historically, why do African Americans have a problem with African culture and art? Anyone?
Now, you know I'll respond to that, but I'm waiting to Audrey get off of mute so we can hear her.
Sorry, I was talking to someone else.
Oh, okay.
Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I do.
Well,
I don't think we really know what African culture is. I don't think we fully understand it enough to say we like it or we don't like it. I mean, our life revolves around American culture, whatever that is. So I don't think we've taken enough time to even realize what African culture and art is all about. I mean, like, for example, all those books that are written by Cheikh Anta Diop, who's read those? Not very many Black Americans. And other African writers. Hardly any Black Americans have read those things to even realize what Black culture is. I mean, what African culture is.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a matter of, I think it's a matter of not understanding it because we all know what it is. And we've only been exposed to what we feel is American culture. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anyone else before Pastor goes?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
No, I just said thank you, and I was asking if anyone else before Pastor. Yeah.
I thought there was someone else speaking there just before.
I did too. I thought it was George.
Hey, Rev, you can go on. I need to give a little bit of thought to what I was about to say. Yeah, you
We can
can go
barely
on.
hear you,
Thank you.
George.
Hey, Rev, I need to give a little bit more thought to what I was about to say. Yeah, you can go on. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thanks. I agree with Audrey that we have not learned enough about African culture to know what it is for the most part. I remember when we fought to get what was called then Black history into college, into the college curriculum. And that in itself was a battle. It has always been a battle when it came to our desires to embrace or to engage in understanding African history and our African culture. And we know now the reason why. However, all Africans in the diaspora develops a culture that speaks to them. And large portions of that culture includes aspects of African culture, but we don't recognize it. The idea of community is an African concept. The idea of the matriarch in family leadership and cultural leadership is an African concept. When it comes to the arts, we find very few African artists, whether it be through poetry or paintings, whether it be through fictional writing or whether it's history, is shunned. And is shunned because we have been taught to shun anything that's African or anything that looks like us. We have been taught, we have been indoctrinated to the extent that the white doctor is a better physician than the African. The professor in college, the white guy with the doctorate, or with the master's rather, is more depth in what he's teaching than the African professor with a PhD. Those are the kinds of things that has diminished our sense of African culture within this diaspora. Yes, it has been and is continuously manipulated by Caucasians. One of the areas that has proliferated this thing called American culture, I don't even know whether it's culture or not, to be honest with you, is the music. And there are no forms of music in America that did not have its genesis with the African. Yet, every form has been co-opted, manipulated, and embraced as their own. And I do not believe for a moment that Beyonce is reclaiming rather, country music is a coincidence. I believe this is a reclamation of a major portion of culture that leads to other portions of our culture that are embraced. The idea of how we cook, what we cook, that is definitely African. I honestly don't know a European who has written a recipe. I know them who co-opted recipes and wrote from and did things from wrote recipes from memory or from other people who are of African descent who gave them to them. The reason that the major thing that Europeans, especially in America, fix it are casseroles. Because casserole is a bunch of stuff that you put together without any kind of sense of flavor. I know without any doubt whatsoever that the idea of spices in foods came from the African. So when we look at those aspects of culture, bright colors, the desire for motherhood, meaning that I'm not talking about having a baby physically, I'm talking about the idea of a mother in a community, a mother in a church. These things that I'm talking about are culturally African, yet we do not associate them with our African origin. One of the main things also has been indoctrinated into us is good hair and skin tone. We have been told that we are not African, that we are Americans. During the week, I heard a restatement of Smokey Robinson that irritates the heck out of me. When he said that he is not an African, he is not an African, he is an American, because when Black men went to war, they were not fighting for Africa, they were fighting for Mississippi, Alabama, etc., as he put it. Therefore, he was not going to dishonor them by saying that he is an African American. And he said that out of total ignorance. Just because you are a celebrity doesn't mean that you're intelligent. He said that out of ignorance. He does not understand what being an American constitutes. He doesn't understand that Americans have privilege, Africans don't. And there are some of you who will say, yes, you do. You don't have a privilege if someone can take it from you. That's not a privilege. They allow you to function a certain way for a certain length of time. That's not a privilege. Americans have privileges, and the only people in America who has privileges are white people. No people of color in America have privileges, even though there are some Japanese who think they do. They forget the internment camps. So to the person who sent the question, I say that is not as simple as a response as we thought it would be. It is difficult because not enough of us have any interest in African history to read the writings of Diop and others. Not enough of us have interest in ourselves to look at our ancestors who were enslaved, our ancestors who brought with them an understanding of our communities prior to where we are now. We're not taking the time to not only read about it, but even talk to them about it. There's a reason that when you look at African families, there's usually one or two people who knows the history of their family. It's because we are so caught up in trying to be an American until we've lost our sense of being African, our sense of community, our desire to be who we were created to be. the only people who are able to keep, who are not permitted to keep their heritage are Africans. You can be a Spanish American, you can be an Italian American, and you have privileges because they're white. You can be a Canadian American, but you cannot possibly be an African American because all of those hyphen Americans that I mentioned have privileges that are not not permitted, that are not for you. Let me put it that way. As an African, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Pastor Audrey, thank you. Anyone else? Anyone have any comments to what was said, the question about African culture in America or lack thereof? Okay, any questions about anything else that may be on your mind?
Still no questions. I would like to add something.
Of course.
The reason I made the statement, American culture, whatever it is, whatever that is because if we actually look into the weeds of it, everything that is called American culture has been co-opted primarily from the African. Greed is not or has not been a cultural thing until, of course, European males made greed a part of the global consciousness as opposed to culture, I should say, maybe. I think it's global consciousness than it is a culture. What is American culture? Have you ever thought about that? What does American culture look like? That's not rhetorical.
Well, that's harder to see to me than trying to find, as you guys have pointed out, African culture. We don't really have a culture in America. As you said, it's money, if anything. It's accumulation of things.
You can't find a culture that doesn't exist. If we were to look at the European community in this country, and we are searching for culture, what do we find? There is a culture of greed. There's a culture of rape. There's a culture of slaveholders. There's a culture of lynchings. There's a culture of genocide. There's a culture of war. That to me is not culture. It's a consciousness. Now, tell me what else exists beyond those negative things or those things that negatively impact humanity. It's not education. It's not philosophy. It's not mathematics. It's not science. What is it? It's not hard. If you look at American art, you find nothing that was not copied from someone else. There is no foundational culture in this country. And religion itself is not a culture. It is a tool to manipulate and indoctrinate people for the express purpose of controlling them. And Europeans didn't even, Europeans are not the father of religion. Did you know that? Stephen acquiescing to Ptolemy and Kemet is the father of religion, an African Kemetic priest, a myth from the Memphite priesthood is the genesis of religion. Questions, comments? I'm done.
I think the closest thing you can come to in terms of culture, American culture, is Southern culture in all its complexities. But even the root of that is Africans. The cooking, the community, the everything is based in African culture, really.
The music.
The banjo.
Mm-hmm. The singing, the everything.
Everything. Yeah. Everything.
Food.
Yes. So what happens is the thing that we have been taught is American culture. It's actually African culture. Though it may be Africans in the diaspora, it's still African culture because we are African. And the only time that anything of Africans that came with the African across the Atlantic is embraced by white people when they can benefit from it. The cooking, the music, all of that. The highest disrespect that is paid to African preachers in particular is when they are in a European church setting and the Europeans want them to sing or to pray, but never to preach. Very rarely, I should say, to preach. Never is too strong a word, but very rarely did it desire them to do that, because they see the African preachers being ignorant, uncultured.
I have a question. We are on several occasions in discussing things, we may say, I don't understand how this one can do that, or see this way, or see that way, especially when we talk about politics. What is it you're looking at? I was listening to an old video the other day about country music and some of the older guys of country music. And but it reminded me that I've heard a lot of the bands, European bands, whether it be rock or country, that talk about being influenced by Black musicians. And they'll say, you know, I heard Muddy Waters, or I heard B.B. King, or I heard this, but you heard it, but the music that produced from it, that your version of what you heard, you know, speaks a lot about how and what you hear, or what you glean from things. So you say this has influenced me, but some of the sounds that come from it, and I'm not criticizing it, but it doesn't resemble at all what you say you heard. So I think it kind of speaks to the not understanding when we talk about even voting or things, how people are influenced by things and what they glean for. What exactly do they hear when they hear this? This touched you in a way that it moved you, but what came out of what you heard doesn't resemble at all what you heard. Does the question make sense at all? So the music to me says more than speaking words, I guess.
Compare rock, since you mentioned. Rock and roll came from Chuck Berry and Little Richard. Now take that and compare it to Led Zeppelin. The rock musicians of European descent, most of the rock is hard rock and screaming as opposed to singing. The versions of rock that came from Africans, you can feel it. It speaks to your soul. The Africans with whom I have had contact, who are able to embrace what we call hard rock. I spent a lot of time in the company of Europeans. Growing up in the African community, that is not what you are influenced by. So when you hear it, it carries a totally different connotation. For me personally, it's irritating. I don't feel it in the way that that music flows in my soul. It's irritating to me. Some of them give me a headache. I just refuse to listen to it because of how it has been abused. It's the nicest word I can think of. So when Audrey brings up the South in terms of culture, I could not agree with her more about it being rooted in the African. If you look at this country during its early stages, it produced nothing. Not one thing. In the early stages, this country produced warriors to take from Native Americans, warriors to separate from the British warriors, War of 1812 trying to take Canada, warriors. It produced nothing else. It didn't even produce a constitution because that was based on the writings that Benjamin Franklin got from Native Americans in Northern New York. So anyway, I'm done.
So then, I'm sorry, someone else want to say something? If not, I was going to ask another question, but someone else go ahead. Okay, looking at the journey that we're on, using this music as an example, the journey that we're on. Music speaks to vibration, it speaks to rhythm, and it shows you, it's actually a measurement as to the paths that we're taking, or the different paths that we're taking. And how do you bridge that gap? Because to say that this one and that one influenced you tells me that you are listening, you are aware, but you are hearing it from a different ear without, I guess I'm just kind of using that as an example to show that, or to talk about that we're on different rhythmic paths, and what do we do about that? And not saying, well, everybody has to listen to the same music. That's not what I'm trying to say at all.
Well, the different genres are important, and being eclectic makes it much what engages you more with music. I'm back to that rock thing again. That is attributed to Elvis Presley, because he was the closest thing to being white who did that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all of us are saying, and you tell me if I'm right or not, please. Those of you who have been speaking about this, and those of you who've been listening. Every single thing in this country is not only, well, let me back up. Every policy in this country is based on race. We are taken into consideration as the ones to be left out of everything when it comes to policy. Everything that is deemed to be cultural is African. So, to me, everything that exists in this country is based on race. And that is the reason that it is impossible to be educated in America, especially a white kid, and not be racist. It is racism to say that Columbus discovered America. It's racism to say that Columbus came in contact with quote unquote Indians when he was in the Caribbean. He came in contact with Africans. It's racist. There is nothing in this country, policy-wise or otherwise, that's not predicated on race. And the race that everything has been designed to disparage is the African. The African, we know more about Italian history than we do Africa as a people in the diaspora. We do. We don't even know about not just history in this country. We don't know Southern history in relationship to the African other than slavery. We don't know anything about the history of the African in the Caribbean, because our single focus has been on the history of America, separate from Africa. But you know what else? We are dumb when it comes to geography. And to show you how easy it is to manipulate people, everyone on this phone, on the phone or on Zoom, you have been taught the same thing, that Europe is a continent. Have you not? And we
Yes.
were that Europe is a continent. There is no way on God's green earth for Europe to be a continent. Europe is barely a landmass when you compare it to other land masses. Geography. We have been taught that the maps that depict the African continent a little bit larger than South America, when in essence, the major countries in this world, the landmass, do not equal the landmass of Africa. That's geography. We don't know anything about the topology of the geography of Africa. Nothing. Right now, there are people journeying to South Carolina, to Charleston. Africans are. You know why? Because of genealogy. We are beginning to increase our desire to know who we are in terms of the African outlook. And I believe that what we are putting in the macro is for the spiritual health of those who are seeking themselves through genealogy. Does that make sense?
It does.
The health of a people is based upon the foundation of a people. And a people with a foundation of water always sinks. For too many of us see our historical foundation as the Atlantic Ocean. As I quoted someone last week, the Atlantic Ocean has never enslaved anybody, Europeans did. Our foundation is not the Atlantic Ocean, neither is it Charleston or the ports of Alabama, Texas. Our foundation is the Cabelon, the land of beginnings, paradise, the land of life. I'm done.
And that, unless there are thoughts or questions, may be a good place to pause for the day. Anyone, thoughts, questions, or what has been discussed, or anything Pastor just said?
I just have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think this is a real blue pill versus red pill kind of moment, especially in terms of what Kathy was talking about, evangelism. So evangelism is mainly changing a person's mindset to be more European, as opposed to any sort of real spiritual kind of, I don't know, what's the word? It's not really about spiritualism. It's more about a European mindset. And what we've been talking about today, I guess, ties in with African culture. What is African culture? What is our mindset? Have we been too evangelized to really know who we are? I just have questions.
That's a good question. I like that.
Well, Audrey, maybe we have been too evangelized to the point where we overlook who we are. Because we act out culture every day.
Right. True.
We just overlook that.
Well, between evangelism and our education, yeah, we don't see ourselves anymore, which was too far removed.
I have to say this. Right now, this has happened before, but it was not successful. Evangelicals are partnering with school boards, and they are going into the schools to remove students who want to understand the Bible or Christianity. And they're taking them off campus to a church nearby. And they're evangelizing them. The kids that they want the most are African kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's who they're seeking. That's who they're asking for. African kids. And they get African preachers involved so that they can say we are diverse, yet they're against diversity. Why is it the African kids? These are white nationalists indoctrinating our children into a white nationalist theology without saying it's white nationalists. We are seeing the results in some of our people who are unable to see the danger of the attitude of a Trump because of white nationalism. They are indoctrinating our children, hear me well, into white nationalism. Christianity has always been about white nationalism. When you say Christianity, you are saying a Christian nationalist. Always have been about white supremacy. And our children are being told that your God is a white dude named Jesus. And that was chosen on purpose, because when you do that, it is more difficult for you to rebel against white people in your thoughts, as well as by you voicing it. Because when you see them subliminally, you see Jesus. And that subconscious effect of seeing Jesus is dangerous. We have to speak to this. Why? Because we have to avoid this plan that they have. We cannot let it be successful.
Yeah.
Right now, there are African preachers involved in this project in Union. And my goal is to destroy the project by virtue of publicizing what their end goal is, taking our children away from who they are and forcing them to be, indoctrinating them, manipulating them to become, to have a mindset of white nationalists as opposed to a mindset of an African. I'm done. Oh, and the mindset of America is white nationalism.
Yeah.
You mentioned this to me before, Pastor, and you remind, I'm trying to remember what the name of the program is, but many years ago, and this has been over 20 years now, when I first moved to Spartanburg and I was working for a company, I heard of this, and I'm trying to remember the name of the program, but I was asked to teach. You could not teach from the Bible on campuses, and they were buying up land or renting land across the street from schools, and it was something I was interested in. And the thing that got me about, and this is when I knew absolutely nothing. I was kind of searching myself, but I was interested in teaching kids, and the thing I remember was them showing me a little pamphlet, a little agenda of how the classes would be set up and the questions. And I remember saying, I don't need you to do this. I'll teach. I'll teach from the Bible. And they told me that I could not do that. I have to follow the agenda. And that's what I just pushed it away and said, no, that's not something I'm interested in. But that was, God, Pastor, that was over 20 years ago when I first, and I don't think in this area that it ever got off the ground.
It didn't. I was approached for the same thing and refused to do it.
Well, yeah, I was, when we were in, where, Kenya, I believe. And we were attending this church. And it was the same kind of thing. They wanted, I was teaching Sunday school, but they wanted everybody to sign this thing that said we teach this particular doctrine. And I had a very uncomfortable feeling about that. And luckily we left shortly thereafter, so I never signed it or anything or gave in to it. But even, yeah, and even in Africa, they're teaching a certain doctrine that they want everybody to comply with, and then indoctrinate Africans with it.
Audrey, we were renting a building from the Association Great New Faith prior to our getting where we are now. And I was during that period, I was the liaison between the state legislature and the State Baptist Convention. And Southern Baptists came after me. They sent 3 Black preachers to me to tell me that if I were to become a Southern Baptist church, they would give us a building. They would give us the money for a building. But we had to sign the document saying that we subscribe to Awana, which is a program that indoctrinates kids. And we also had to sign a document saying that we would not teach the concept of speaking in tongues because it was not a Christian concept. And my question was, if it's not a Christian concept, then why is it in the Bible? And based on that one thing, I told them, no, thank you. I went back to Great New Faith and told them what happened. They were trying to buy us because they needed some of us in the Southern Baptist convention setting, because they wanted, they could also not only get grant money for this with basketball stuff, but they could also they had an inroad to our children, and I refused to do it. It just didn't sit right with me, especially when I got to sign a document. You go, in other words, you go tell me what I can teach.
Yes.
You go tell me what portions of the Bible I can use. And 99% of everything that the evangelical teaches is from Paul. Paul is their Jesus, if you want to equate it. Because everything they teach far more from Paul than they ever taught about Jesus. Only thing they teach about Jesus, he's your Savior, and you got to be baptized in Christ Jesus. That's all they teach about Jesus. But when it comes to Paul, slaves, obey your master. Women, learn from your husband at home. That kind of crazy stuff. I could never get down with that. Even though I have preached and I have taught for years in evangelical churches. And the last time I taught in one, I remember them talking about the Christian George W. Bush. And I said, so he's a Christian, and the word out there is that he threw his wife through a door in the garage in a drunken rage. So what you're telling me is that in order for you to be a Christian, you got to be a Republican. Is that true? So if I'm a Democrat, I'm going to hell, but you're a Republican, you good with Jesus. They'd never let me back in the church again. They even got rid of the pastor to let me teach. That's how deep this thing is. And that's how deep it has always been. They don't care about you singing. They don't care about you shouting, running up and down the aisle. They don't care about that. Not at all. What they care about is what comes across that pulpit. That's what they care about. Women came preach. That came from white folks. That didn't come from us. I was a little boy when I met my first female preacher. There have been female preachers in the African community for years, but not in there. You were not accepted if you had female preachers in the pulpit, especially. I'm done. Let me stop talking. Y'all good. Done.
A couple of things though I see in what we've discussed. Several of us have been approached by these things, and at least in our environment, that they did not get off the ground. That says something to me, and what we put in the macro and where we are and why are we discussing this right now. So this be a part of our meditation, of course. And again, this is going to come up. The other thing that you said, you talked about Paul being their Jesus. Based on the relationships that that Paul had and how this thing came about, if you look at it historically, if Jesus didn't exist, then neither did Paul. So all of this is based on fiction, and that too is something that is worthy of meditating and taking a close look at. All I'm saying is, without knowing what I'm saying, is all of this has a spiritual meaning that I don't quite understand or see yet. But just pointing out, I think, the things that are obvious to me that we can kind of meditate on and see a deeper meaning to it. So anyway,
I believe that.
I'm sorry.
I believe that in order for you to be who you were created to be, you have to be able to create in your image.
Yeah.
I believe that. And the substance that we have been given is the spirit of Europeans and not the physical body. The spirit meaning the thoughts.
Yeah.
For us to make in our image, from being barbaric to being civilized, from being greedy to being community oriented, from being genocidal, from creating only weapons of destruction to desiring to be created as its creator is, loving kindness. I believe that. I don't believe that likeness or image has anything to do with body structure or physicality. is all spiritual and is all thoughts. Suppose for a moment, if we look at this from a spiritual perspective, no physical bodies whatsoever, total spirituality. Suppose that the spiritual essence of the spiritual essence of a European mindset and the spiritual essence of the African mindset have been brought into existence, not so much for the merging of the two, but for the correction. Bringing a mindset to a space where the Creator desires us to be. In other words, removing that European mindset from all of the isms and all the other stuff, the fiction that is created in, because Christianity is a work of fiction, removing from all of that and teaching the principles of Maya. Not living by these principles only when it's convenient, but not living by them at all, but becoming them. Suppose that's what we are seeing reflected in physicality when we talk about the browning of America or the global browning. Suppose that's what we're talking about. How does that strike you? Suppose the truth of the matter is the exploitation of humanity is allowed not by our Creator, but by us. And that's why we were exploited.
I believe that.
And the only way we can cease being exploited is to love the invaders, the imperialists, the colonialists, the racists, the slave owners. Suppose that's true. That being true, then our goal ends exploitation. And we meet resistance like the seed of the tree pushing its roots into the ground. We meet that resistance because white people place a greater value on the color of their skin than they do the condition of their heart. And when that is handled, when that is reconciled, when we recognize that when we teach to the point where no one puts value on the color of their skin, but on the content of their soul, on their heart. To me, superiority is being one with your Creator. Everything else is inferior. Why? Inferiority is about not knowing or caring about your Creator. It is destructive. Loving kindness is superior to hatred. Is it not?
It is.
Loving kindness, the appreciation and respect for life is superior to genocide. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's in this regard that I speak of superiority versus inferiority. Has nothing to do with the color of the skin at all. but everything to do with the content of the heart. Everyone with any sense of what exists will tell you that the most spiritual people on the earth are Africans. Yet, when the African speaks of spirituality, and when the African desires to bring a sense of understanding to spirituality, the African is rejected as being pagan. And the one who needs to understand the spirituality most are the ones who's rejecting spirituality and embracing a fictitious image, a fictitious person called Jesus. And Ron, you're absolutely right. No Jesus, no Paul.
Yeah.
Suppose that we being where we are, embracing the non-existence of all these characters and embracing the comedic truth of spirituality is all we need to transpose the mindset of the races, or transpose the mindset of the non-spiritual. And when I say non-spiritual, I don't mean they're not spirit. I mean non-spiritual in that the religion of the European, the thing that Europeans worship is not Jesus. The thing that Europeans worship is the color of their skin. They're more concerned with genetic preservation than they are with human life. They are more concerned with genetic preservation because to them, it is the highest power on earth to be white. And what we have done is debunked all of that. What we continue to do is to put it in a place, put it under a microscope for everyone to see. And in seeing it, they began to see that there is no salvation in Christianity. Salvation is in knowing who you are. You cannot be delivered by Jesus. You're delivered by your desires. We are obligated to do what we are doing because we have been given the spiritual essence of the Creator. And we cannot allow dysfunctionality to overrule functionality. We cannot revert to being indoctrinators because us on this call, and this Zoom, we were the teachers in churches. We were the indoctrinators, you know that. We were the manipulators, and we had no clue that we were trained indoctrinators. At some point, we have to embrace that reality and move on. My parting words with you today is this. During the state of meditation, you don't have to remember the individual things that we're going to meditate about. You simply meditate because everything within you, your deepest mindset, your deepest source of memory is your soul. And when you meditate, all of those things are addressed simply by you being quiet, shutting out the outside world by closing your eyes and breathing. This puts you in rhythm with the universe. And when you are in rhythm with the universe, you're at peace. It's not good enough to be in rhythm with the universe on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We have to be in rhythm with the universe 24/7. A friend of mine died this week. Very close. We're very close since college. And I'm not talking about my college roommate, another one. And what I realized in making efforts to deal with his transition is the power that he represented in this earth. And transitioning from believing that politics is the answer and knowing that spirituality is the answer to everything that there are questions about. Ron made a statement earlier. He said that, in my words, not his, that we were shown the ships were removed from our view so we could see Africa, so we could see who we are. That's who he is. He's an ancestor now, but he is one who sought to remove from our view the shores of Charleston and the ships of the Jews that brought us here to be enslaved. In order for us to see a Kabbalah, and in doing so, seeing the value of embracing our nature, as opposed to being in denial about it simply because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And to be quite frank with you, our feelings, white folk always hurt our feelings. And all that they did with us were lies. If the truth hurts their feelings, if the truth hurts your feelings, get over it. It doesn't matter to me about your feelings being hurt when it's the truth that's hurting your feelings. It wouldn't hurt you if you didn't know it was the truth. It wouldn't make you uncomfortable if you didn't know it was the truth. When we talked about that Jesus didn't exist, people were uncomfortable because you know it's the truth. When you know something is a lie, it doesn't make you uncomfortable, it makes you angry. It frustrates you. Get over yourself and realize that regardless of what you think consciously, you know what resonates with you. And you know doggone well that the concept, not the concept, I'm sorry, The reality of the concept about Jesus is fiction because it did something to you. It made you feel a certain kind. Resonate with the universe at all times. Train yourself to meditate often till you get to the point where you live in a meditative state. I'm done. Be well. Enjoy the rest of your day, unless there are questions or comments.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. If you have any questions, send them to me or send them to Pastor or one of the other facilitators, and we'll discuss them, okay? I hope everybody have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, family.